News 2 presents To the Point.
Our first point this morning, the race for the White House heating up on both sides of the aisle. This morning, lawmakers are reacting to the news of President Biden's re-election campaign and obstacles in front of several GOP presidential hopefuls. Our second point, the top jobs in Charleston and North Charleston, both up for grabs. Today we have mayoral candidates from both cities here in our studio. Why these candidates say they're both the best for each of those jobs. In our third point, abortion legislation on hold in South Carolina after a decision in the State House. We'll tell you where the state law stands and what it means. Good Sunday morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on To the Point. This is the show where we break down the political stories and issues that matter to you. I'm Riley Benson. Our first point today, News 2 is your local election headquarters. We have major developments in the presidential race. Former President Donald Trump finding himself caught up in more controversy regarding the January 6, 2021 attacks. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley makes a plea to one of the nation's largest companies. And presidential hopeful Tim Scott planning more stops in the Lowcountry. But one of the biggest headlines of the week, President Joe Biden has officially announced he will seek a second term in the White House. We're taking a look at his platform and how South Carolina's leaders are reacting in this morning's first point. President Joe Biden announcing this week he will seek re-election in 2024.
That's why I'm running for re-election. Because I know America.
The president making it official in a pre-recorded video released 4 years to the day after his last White House bid.
When I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we're in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are.
Once again, framing his campaign as a battle for the soul of the nation, highlighting scenes from the January 6th Capitol attack and the division within the country fueled by what he calls mega extremists, calling on voters to fight for what he sees as basic American values.
Every generation of Americans has faced a moment when they have to defend democracy. Stand up for our personal freedom. Stand up for the right to vote and our civil rights. And this is our moment.
South Carolina Democrats backing the president after propelling him to victory 4 years ago.
The capacity, he has the vision, he has the compassion, and yes, he has the substance.
He has spent his first term fighting for freedom, fighting for more rights and not less rights, and fighting to secure our democracy. And that's why he's running for re-election, because he wants to finish the job.
And despite concerns from some about his age, President Biden says that he is ready, willing, and able to serve the country for another 4 years.
Let's finish this job. I know we can, because this is the United States of America. There's nothing, simply nothing we cannot do if we do it together.
Now, other South Carolina leaders are also reacting to the president's news. Here's a statement from United States Senator Tim Scott, who's of course exploring his own run for president in 2024. In a statement, he says, quote, "Another term would be a disaster for the American people," end quote. He went on to say, his story is only possible in this country, but Democrats are attacking every rung that allowed him to climb. And he ended his statement with, "I have faith in America, and it's about time the president did too," end quote. I want to bring in News 2's political analyst John Bersini. John, obviously big news. President Biden now officially saying he will rerun for the office.
You know, Riley, there was talk at least at one time that President Biden may not seek re-election. And perhaps we were foolish in America to think that if you've got the top position in politics in our country, that you simply just walk away from that.
John, what's the weight of this announcement? Obviously he's going to seek re-election, obviously against former President Donald Trump, but how does this weigh with American people? I mean, 70% in an NBC poll say Democrats don't want him to run again. So how does this weigh?
Right. So again, that's certainly interesting. At the end of the day, though, what you will find, people are going to back the incumbent president of the United States. When the plane that you are on commands the airspace, when traffic stops because of you, you have a tendency to get behind that person. It's part of the messaging, too, that makes incumbency so powerful, just is the insignia of the president of the United States.
Well, John, obviously South Carolina propelled President Biden to the office. The first in the South will be here for the Democrats. So Jim Clyburn has been a big proponent for him. He will be a part of his campaign staff. Talk about what that means to have that backing.
So again, that's huge, and the president is facing some challengers. Again, Robert Kennedy Jr. has gotten in that race. Marianne Williamson has gotten into that race. But what President Biden really has done with his announcement is more than likely he has frozen out any type of serious competitor. Now, everyone, of course, is running. You can view them as being serious, but to be able to mobilize the infrastructure to raise the money to really mount a serious campaign is tough. and the president certainly goes in with a huge advantage.
You know, John, one of the things that the president is facing as an obstacle are questions about his age. Obviously, he will be in his 80s at the point of serving in a second term if he won. So how does the president go about dispelling some of those questions, you know, reassuring people he is fit to run for another term in office?
So the president himself has actually said that the age question is fair for anyone over the age of 70. And again, this is relative. Again, if you look at the fact that at the end of his final term, the president would be 86. Donald Trump will be 84 if he were elected. So again, that's certainly relevant. It depends on the lens in which you are looking at age. But at the end of the day, though, if the president can continue to convince the American people that he is ready, willing, able, and competent to perform the job, then he certainly has a strong case moving forward.
And John, on the other side of the aisle, 2 Republican candidates from South Carolina are running for president. News 2's Carolyn Murray got a chance to sit down with Governor Henry McMaster and asked his reaction to both Nikki Haley and Tim Scott potentially running for president. Here's what he had to say.
Well, from the very beginning, I've been with President Trump. But I think that Nikki Haley, Ambassador Governor Haley, is an excellent candidate. I think that Council Member, Congressman, Senator Scott is an excellent candidate. I'm proud as I can be to be a South Carolinian and have those 2 people running. But I've been committed to President Trump from the beginning, but I'm delighted that they're running because I think they showcase South Carolina, and who knows, they just might win.
Meanwhile, former Vice President Mike Pence testified before a federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. on Thursday about former President Donald Trump's role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. A federal investigation is working to determine whether Trump acted unlawfully in his efforts to overturn his 2020 presidential election loss and stop the peaceful transfer of power. Last month, a federal judge ordered Pence to comply with a subpoena to testify, which Trump sought to appeal. However, Pence's appeal was rejected on Wednesday. And former South Carolina governor and Republican presidential hopeful Nikki Haley wants to bring the happiest place on earth to the Palmetto State. During a Fox News interview, Haley said that South Carolina would happily accept the hundreds of thousands of jobs that Disney provides and suggested that the theme park relocate to South Carolina. The comments come as Disney is suing Florida governor and one of Haley's likely rivals for the GOP nomination, Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, Disney claims DeSantis is, quote, weaponizing government power over the company after Disney came out publicly against a Florida bill that limits classroom discussion of sexual orientation or gender identity, dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill by critics. And happening today, South Carolina Republican Senator Tim Scott is hosting a town hall in Charleston. The event is part of his Faith in America tour and comes after a visit to Iowa. Scott recently announced his exploratory committee for president and is visiting key primary states to, quote, share his message of restoring home, creating opportunity, and protecting America. Today's event starts at 4:45, but it is an invite-only event. Another Republican presidential hopeful, Vivek Ramaswamy, is meeting with South Carolina voters today. The businessman and self-proclaimed political outsider started a bus tour across South Carolina on Thursday. This made stops throughout the Midlands and upstate. And on the other side of the aisle, a presidential candidate who is running against President Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination was in the Lowcountry on Thursday. Marianne Williamson spoke at the College of Charleston's Bully Pulpit series, which encouraged students to get involved in politics by facilitating dialogue with local and national leaders. During the event, she spoke about the importance of youth engagement and a forward-thinking next generation. Take a listen.
Over time, it is every generation's job to create a more perfect union. That is why we answered slavery with abolition. It is why we answered suppression of women with suffragists. That is why we answered Gilded Age with labor movement. It is why we answered segregation with the civil rights movement. Because that is our mission, to every generation do its part to more and more fully manifest the ideals on which we purport to stand.
Candidate in that race is Robert Kennedy Jr. All right, when we come back, more challengers are entering the mayoral races in North Charleston and Charleston. We're hearing from candidates who think they're the best person for the job. That's just ahead on the other side of the break. Stick with us. You're watching To The Point. Welcome back to The Point. Our second point today, we're breaking down local mayoral races. We want to start in the city of North Charleston. I welcome in Russ Coletti, a candidate for mayor of North Charleston. Thank you so much for joining us.
Raleigh, thank you for having me on the show.
Quickly, just tell us who you are.
My name is Russell Coletti. I was born and raised in New York, joined the Navy at age 18. served in both the United States Navy and United States Air Force for 22 years. Came to Charleston in '87 and never left. While I was here, I was also operations manager for 30 years at FedEx Express here in North Charleston as well. So I come to the mayoral race with about 35 years of leadership under my belt.
You know, Mr. Clutty, you talk about flooding, we talk about growth, so many things in the city. What's big for you when it comes to your platform?
People. I'm a people person, and I want to be a mayor for the people. I want everybody within this city, North Charleston, to feel wanted and as important as everybody else within the Low Country. So I want to bring the experience of a mayor to your front door. I want to be the person that shares the wealth of our tax base with all the communities and not just certain pockets within the city.
You know, you're talking about infrastructure. Do you want to touch on what you hope to do if you were to be elected mayor?
Yeah, our infrastructure, for years and years and years we talk about infrastructure, but nothing gets done. My second phone call will be to the governor to see what we could do to help alleviate the traffic situations here in the Low Country. It's locked up day in and day out, morning, noon, and night. So we got to figure out a way to help the people transit our city quickly and peacefully.
You know, I think we have about 30 seconds left. So your message to voters, what you want them to know at this point, obviously months away from the election.
I'm the person that you want to put in the mayoral office, and I want to make sure that I pave the way for future mayors to know that they have somebody that cares and really does the right thing for the people.
Mr. Clutty, any final thoughts real quick?
No, I thank you, appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so much.
Happening tomorrow, North Charleston Police Chief and mayoral hopeful Reggie Burgess will hand in his badge. Burgess grew up in North Charleston and has served with the North Charleston Police Department for over 30 years. He's leaving the role in hopes of serving as North Charleston's next mayor. Burgess announced that he was running after longtime North Charleston Mayor Keith Summy announced he would not seek re-election. Former Assistant Chief Greg Gomes was sworn in as North Charleston's newest Chief of Police on Friday morning. A longtime Mount Pleasant police chief has announced that he will run to be the next sheriff of Charleston County. Carl Ritchie has more than 3 decades of law enforcement experience in the Low Country. He was most recently Mount Pleasant's top cop, but he feels now is the right time to make the next move in his career.
So now's the time for me to step up and run for sheriff. I've had a lot of great conversations again with former sheriff, different folks in leadership throughout the county, and I think this is the right time for me to announce my candidacy and start campaigning.
You now want to welcome in Charleston City Councilman Peter Shayed. Peter, a candidate for Charleston City Mayor. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, I think there's some familiarity with who you are,
Yes.
but if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself for us.
Sure, I'm Peter Shade. I'm on Charleston City Council. I'm an attorney, lifelong resident of Charleston, married with 3 kids and 1 granddaughter. I've been involved in city government for past 8 years, federal prosecutor for about 10 years, and a municipal judge over here in Mount Pleasant.
So, you know, obviously, when you talk about flooding, you talk about affordable housing, a number of issues in the city of Charleston,
Yes.
but as far as you, what's your platform for the mayor?
So my platform is for us to rethink Charleston. I've broken it down into 2 words, leadership and livability. Leadership is the ability to take the issues in front of us, such as public safety, flooding that you mentioned earlier, workforce housing, but also the livability things that matter most to the people of Charleston, which are those things that we just mentioned. Charleston's changed in the past 8 years. We've seen a riot take place. We've seen shootings on King Street. There's a murder in my district just a couple of weeks ago, several shootings and a major drug bust that happened. So the number of weapons and drug-related offenses have increased by 30% in the city of Charleston. And I think that's something that our citizens need to be aware of and concerned about. Public safety is the #1 issue of a government, of a city government in particular. We can't protect our citizens, no matter what else we have available to us, we're just not doing a very good job.
You know, my question would be is, what do you think the biggest issue facing, you know, constituents in the city of Charleston is right now?
So I would put public safety at the very front of that, and for the reason I just mentioned. And based on my background as a federal prosecutor and municipal judge, I'm the candidate most qualified to address those particular issues and things that we need to do with that. But we do have other issues that are on people's mind. Obviously, flooding is a huge issue. In my district of West Ashley, I deal with that on a regular basis. with folks on a rainy day, on a high tide, things of that nature. I created the stormwater department, splitting it off from the public works department. So we had a city department that was focused on just one thing, and that was taking care of flooding issues.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. Abortion legislation on hold in South Carolina after a decision in the State House. We'll tell you where the state law stands and what it means. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Today's third point, the battle over abortion rights continues at the national and state level. Let's start nationally as presidential candidate Nikki Haley is working to set herself apart from other Republican candidates. Haley says she's looking to change the way abortion is talked about, focusing less on policy and numbers and more on abortion as a personal issue to attract moderate voters. She made the comments during a speech in Virginia. Haley praised the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade to give the option to the states, but is the only woman to announce her bid for the GOP nomination so far. She says she's taking a sensitive approach to the subject. Nothing that as staunchly pro-life as she is, everyone has a story that deserves to be heard and respected.
You don't save any lives if you can't enact your position into law. And you can't do that unless you find consensus. Reaching consensus starts with humanizing, not demonizing. Just like I have my story, I respect everyone who has their story. I don't judge someone who is pro-choice any more than I want them to judge me for being pro-life.
And meanwhile, here in the Palmetto State, South Carolina lawmakers have continued a bill that would have banned nearly all abortions in the state. The state Senate voted 22 to 21 on the bill, which would have protected life at the moment of conception, banning nearly all abortions. Now, that bill can't be taken up again until next year. This marks the third time a near-total abortion ban has failed. The chamber's 5 women filibustered the proposal with several speeches, including one from a low-country Republican State Senator Sandy Senn.
So are we supposed to call them when we have sex and, say we better bring out the machines now?
And you say that lightheartedly. You say that lightheartedly. But when this General Assembly enacts laws predicated upon a finding of fact that says a life begins when the sperm fertilizes the egg and that the state has an absolute duty to protect life, that is not far-fetched, did you know, Senator?
News News political analyst John Bersini joining us back for one of our favorite sessions, What to Watch at the State House. John, let's start with the school voucher bill. This is something that was sponsored by Low Country Senator Larry Grooms, now headed to McMaster's desk. Talk to us about that.
Right, so this is S39. It is suspected the governor will probably sign that bill maybe as soon as this coming week. Again, the House finished up their work this past week, again giving that third and final reading.
John, anything else that parents need to know about this bill, obviously, now that it will likely go to effect?
So there's going to be a process to apply for what they're calling the educational scholarships. $6,000 is the cap. 5,000 students the first year, 10,000 the second, 15,000 the third year, or as far as the maximum that can apply. But continue to stay tuned to the Department of Education's website for more information.
John, we heard about how abortion now likely dead for the year. Let's talk about the Senate special session that now will come in the coming weeks. What do we need to know about that? What's important to watch?
So the biggest issue they probably will take up would be anything related to the budget. Again, if there's any kind of discrepancies, that certainly probably will move to a conference committee. Another big question: what does the State House now do with the 6-week abortion ban that the Senate passed earlier this year? Are they going to take that up in the final 2 weeks? If so, then that probably would go to a conference committee as well too, and we would see some sort of special session to tackle those issues leading into the summer.
Well, John, like you mentioned, time is ticking at this point. In a general sense, we heard about short-term rentals being discussed in the State House this past week. What are the major things as we're in a time crunch? What do people need to really look at and watch that could maybe get across the finish line?
So the transparency and education bill, we certainly expect that to be taken up by the full Senate this coming week. The House will probably work on the repeal of Certificate of Need, which deals with medical licensing in the state. Several big issues still remain, hate crimes being one, constitutional carry being another. There are several issues right now that are in play in the State House, and certainly now, again, abortion in the House of Representatives to consider the Senate's 6-week ban. Does that happen? This was something they necessarily didn't anticipate. With 2 weeks left, is there even enough time for them to take up that measure?
All right, John, thank you so much. Always good
Pleasure,
to have you
my
on
friend.
the show. All right, finally here on To The Point, South Korea's president made a very special presentation while attending a state dinner at the White House. Take a listen, I love this.
Music used to make me smile. And now I knew if I had my chains that I could make those people dance and maybe they'd be happy for a while.
All right, how about that? I don't know, some karaoke singers getting the run for their money right there. All right, thank you so much for joining us on To The Point. We'll be back next week with the latest political news. You can catch us right here every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Have a great Sunday.